All right, so we're diving into this Australian Qualifications Framework thing, the AQF. You've been pretty curious about it. You sent over some excerpts from the official document from 2013. Clearly, you're ready to move past the basics here. One thing that really stood out to me from what you sent was your question about how the AQF helps someone, say someone fresh out of high school, actually navigate their education and career options here in Australia.
Yeah, that's a great place to start, I think. It really gets to the heart of what the AQF is all about. It's like a roadmap for learning, but instead of just like listing a bunch of qualifications, it connects them, shows how each step builds on the last one.
Okay, so let's imagine our listener is finishing high school right now. What role does the AQF play for them at that very moment?
Well, their senior secondary certificate of education, that's already on the AQF ladder, usually at level 2 or 3. It depends on the state or territory. So they're already on the framework. And from there, the AQF helps them see the different paths they can take. Want to go straight into a trade? Great, there's a certificate through waiting, thinking about university. The AQF shows how different diplomas can get you there, or how an advanced diploma can even knock off a chunk of a bachelor's degree.
Hold on. Knocking off a chunk of a degree, that sounds like a huge time and money saver. I wish I'd known about that back in the day. Is that where the credit transfer stuff comes in? That was highlighted in one of the excerpts.
You got it. The AQF has these built-in pathways and credit arrangements that recognize that learning happens everywhere, not just in a classroom. So for a high school grad,
Hmm.
work part-time, gain some relevant skills, or maybe crushed a few online courses. The AQF encourages recognizing that experience, potentially giving them credit towards a formal qualification.
I see. So this framework isn't just about ticking boxes. It's about actually valuing someone's individual learning journey. But how does it actually ensure that the quality is consistent, whether you're learning on the job or in some fancy university lecture hall?
That's where the structure of the AQS comes in, 10 levels, each with clear learning outcomes. And it's not just about what you know, it's what you can do with that knowledge. So for example, at level 5, the diploma level, the AQF expects you to demonstrate autonomy and judgment in your field, taking on more responsibility, making decisions based on what you know.
Oh, so it's like leveling up in a video game. Each level demands more skills and the ability to use them in increasingly complex situations.
Exactly. And this progression applies across all fields, so a diploma of nursing and a diploma of engineering, well, totally different subjects, right, which share that core focus on independent work and problem solving at level 5. This helps ensure a consistent standard of quality, no matter what you're studying.
That makes a lot of sense. But let's zoom out for a second. I know from your notes that the AQF isn't just some internal Australian thing. It's designed to be recognized internationally.
Right.
Why is that so important?
It's huge. For anyone thinking about studying abroad or working in another country, the AQF is built to align with other international qualifications frameworks. This means an Australian degree won't be a mystery to an employer overseas, in, say, Canada or the UK. They can look at the AQF level, understand the skills and knowledge it represents.
So it's like having a universal translator for your qualifications, which is especially helpful in a world where people are increasingly mobile.
Exactly. And this international recognition helps build confidence in Australian education, attracting students and skilled workers from around the world.
Okay, so we've talked about starting points, pathways, levels, even global recognition. I'm curious, what actually happens behind the scenes to make sure all of this runs smoothly? Who's keeping an eye on things, making sure qualifications meet these AQF standards?
Well, the AQF isn't just a document sitting on a shelf. It's actively governed by all levels of Australian government, the Commonwealth, states, and territories. And then you have accrediting bodies, making sure qualifications actually measure up to the AQF criteria. It's a big collaborative effort to ensure quality and consistency.
So it's not just a free-for-all. Someone's actually double-checking that a certain diploma really does represent the skills and knowledge it claims to.
Absolutely. And once a qualification is accredited, it's officially registered, adding another layer of transparency. Anyone can look this up. See which organizations are authorized to offer which qualifications.
Wow. Way more structured than I initially realized, but I'm guessing all this structure and oversight comes with its own set of challenges, right? How do you make sure the AQF stays relevant in a world where jobs and technologies are constantly changing?
That's where things get really interesting, and why the AQF is more than just a static document. It has to be a living, breathing framework, adapting to new realities. We're seeing things like micro-credentials, short, focused courses, gaining traction, and the AQF needs to figure out how those fit into the bigger picture.
So there's this constant balancing act between maintaining these high standards And being flexible enough to accommodate new ways of learning and working.
Exactly, and this is where your feedback really hits the mark. We need to delve deeper into these emerging trends and how the AQF can adapt to support them without compromising its core values.
I'm with you on that. It's clear the AQF is way more than just a list of qualifications. It's a complex system, touches on everything from individual learning journeys to the global economy. But before we get too far ahead of ourselves, I think we need to unpack those learning outcomes a bit more. They seem to be at the heart of what makes the AQF tick.
Absolutely, and I think the best way to illustrate their importance is to take a look at some specific examples. From the document you provided, ready to see the AQF in action?
Let's do it. It's always more engaging with real-world examples. Plus, I'm dying to know what these learning outcomes actually look like at different levels. I'm picturing something like a video game skill tree, but for real life.
Haha, I love that analogy. Let's explore that in our next segment.
All right, so we're about to unlock the AQF's skill tree. Where do we even begin? You mentioned some specific examples from the document, right?
Yeah, let's start with something relatable. That part-time job our high school grad might have had. So they worked as a barista, learning to make coffee, handle cash, and deal with customers. Now, that might not seem directly related to their future career goals, but under the AQF, it could actually count towards a Certificate 2 in hospitality.
Okay, I see. So they're on-the-job barista training. Could get them partway to a formal qualification. That's pretty cool.
Exactly. And if they decided to pursue that Certificate 2, the AQF would spell out precisely what they need to know and be able to do at that level. For example, one learning outcome might be apply safe work practices in a hospitality environment. It's not just about making a good latte. It's about understanding workplace safety, hygiene standards, customer service protocols.
So the AQF sets a baseline, ensuring that anyone with a Certificate 2 in hospitality has a certain level of competency, regardless of where they learn those skills.
Precisely. Now, let's say our barista grad is feeling ambitious, decides to aim for a diploma of hospitality management. That sits at AQF level 5.
The learning outcomes there, they'd be more complex. Instead of just applying safe work practices, they might need to develop and implement workplace safety procedures for a team. See the difference?
Oh, yeah. It's like going from following the recipe to creating your own. More responsibility, more leadership, more big picture thinking. You nailed it. And this pattern continues as you climb higher. Let's say they eventually decide to go for a bachelor's degree in tourism management, which is AQF level 7. What are the learning outcomes there might involve analyzing tourism trends and developing sustainable business strategies.
Wow. So they've gone from making coffee to shaping the future of the tourism industry. It's amazing to see how the AQF maps out this progression from practical skills to strategic thinking and leadership.
It really is a powerful illustration of how the AQF supports lifelong learning. You can start at one point on the framework, keep building your skills and knowledge to reach your goals, whether that's advancing in a particular field or branching out into something new.
You know what? I'm starting to think of the AQF as less of a ladder and more like a jungle gym. You can climb in different directions, explore various paths, even swing back around if you discover a new passion.
I love that. And this flexibility is especially important in today's world, where jobs are constantly changing, new industries emerging. Speaking of which, remember those micro-credentials we touched on earlier? That's where this jungle gym analogy gets really interesting.
Okay, yeah. Remind me about micro-credentials again. They're like bite-sized chunks of learning, right?
Right. They focus on specific skills or knowledge areas. Think of a short course on digital marketing or project management. They're not full-blown qualifications like a diploma or a degree, but they can be incredibly valuable for upskilling quickly or filling specific knowledge gaps.
So how do these micro-credentials fit into the AQF's grand scheme of things?
That's a question that's being actively explored right now. You see micro-credentials. They often align well with the AQF's focus on learning outcomes. You learn a specific skill, you can demonstrate that skill, boom, you've achieved a micro-credential.
But they're not formally on the AQF ladder yet.
Not in a standardized way, no. But that's where the AQF's adaptability comes in. There's talk of creating a system for recognizing and accrediting micro-credentials within the AQF. Imagine being able to stack these smaller units of learning towards a larger qualification, or using them to show potential employers you've got specific in-demand skills.
Oh, so instead of climbing one giant ladder, you might be weaving together a bunch of smaller ropes and bridges to reach your destination on the AQF jungle gym.
Exactly. It's about acknowledging that learning doesn't always happen in a linear, traditional way. And that's where technology comes in, too. We might see a future where the AQF is seamlessly integrated with online learning platforms, making it easier for individuals to identify relevant micro-credentials, track their progress, even receive digital badges or certificates to showcase their achievements.
Sounds like a personalized learning adventure. But hold on, wouldn't this make the AQF incredibly complex to manage? How do you ensure quality control when you're dealing with all these different learning pathways and these bite-sized qualifications?
That's the million-dollar question. And it's where the AQF's commitment to transparency and accountability becomes even more crucial. As the framework expands to encompass these new ways of learning, we need to ensure that the assessment methods also adapt. Think portfolio-based assessments, simulations, or even AI-powered tools that can provide personalized feedback.
So it sounds like assessment is going to become more dynamic and personalized. But let's step back for a moment. Talk about the bigger picture. We've explored the AQF's structure, levels, learning outcomes, pathways, even its potential to embrace micro-credentials. But I'm curious about its impact on the future of work in Australia.
That's a crucial question. We've touched on the AQF's role in supporting lifelong learning, but it goes deeper than that. By promoting a culture of continuous learning and skills development, the AQF can help build a more agile and competitive Australian workforce, which is essential in a world where technology and globalization are constantly reshaping industries.
So it's not just about getting a job right out of school. It's about being equipped to adapt and thrive in a constantly changing job market.
Precisely. And by fostering international recognition of qualifications, the AQF can also make Australian workers more competitive on a global scale, opening up opportunities for them to work abroad or contribute to international projects.
It sounds like the AQF is playing a key role in preparing Australians for the future of work. But let's not forget about the AQF itself. We've talked about how it might adapt to micro-credentials. But what other changes might we see on the horizon? How do we ensure the AQF continues to evolve, remain relevant in the years to come?
That's where collaboration and dialogue become essential. We need to bring everyone to the table, educators, learners, industry experts, and policymakers, to discuss the challenges and opportunities facing the Australian education and training system. And we need to be willing to experiment and innovate, while always staying true to the AQF's core values: quality, consistency, and transparency.
It sounds like the AQF's future success hinges on striking this delicate balance between maintaining these high standards and embracing innovation and adaptability. This has been an incredible deep dive so far, but I can't help but wonder, what stands out to you as the most significant insight we've uncovered about the AQF today?
For me, it's the realization that the AQF isn't just some bureaucratic framework. It's a dynamic system that reflects a deep commitment to lifelong learning and the empowerment of individuals. It's about creating a culture where learning is valued, recognized, and supported throughout a person's life, whether it happens in a classroom, a workplace, or even through personal exploration.
That's beautifully said. It's like the AQF is not just a roadmap, but a philosophy, a belief in the transformative power of education.
Exactly. And I think this focus on the individual learner is what sets the AQF apart. It recognizes that every person has a unique learning journey, and that our education system should support and celebrate those individual paths.
This has been incredibly enlightening. I'm starting to see the AQF as a powerful tool for personal and national growth. But before we get too philosophical, there's one last thing I'm curious about. Remember that excerpt you mentioned earlier about the AQF's emphasis on registers for qualifications and issuing organizations?
You mean the part about ensuring that anyone can easily verify the legitimacy of qualifications, track the qualifications they've issued?
Exactly. It's like a public ledger for education, ensuring that everything is above board.
Precisely. And this commitment to transparency and accountability is crucial for building trust and confidence in the AQF. It's like a quality assurance stamp that says, you can be confident that this qualification represents real skills and knowledge.
I'm just imagining how this transparency could be even further enhanced in the digital age, perhaps through blockchain technology or similar innovations.
That's a fascinating thought. We might see a future where qualifications are issued and verified on a secure, decentralized platform, making the AQF even more robust and resistant to fraud.
Now that's a future worth exploring, but for now, let's shift gears and talk about the international context. You mentioned that the AQF is designed to align with other qualifications frameworks around the world. I'm curious, how do these frameworks themselves compare? What can we learn from each other to create a more equitable and effective global system of education and training?
That's a great question to delve into next, and one that highlights the interconnected nature of education in today's world. Let's dive into that in our final segment.
Okay, so we've established the AQF plays well with others on the global stage, but what are those others actually like?
Well, that's where things get really fascinating. It's like peeking into different countries' educational cultures. Some frameworks, like the European Qualifications Framework, the EQF, aim for this big picture harmony across a whole region. Others might have a stronger focus on vocational skills
Oh,
versus academic knowledge, reflecting their economic priorities.
I see. So it's not just about comparing levels, but understanding the underlying philosophies and goals of each framework.
Exactly. For example, some countries have a very centralized system, kind of a top-down approach to education. Australia, with the AQF, has a bit more interplay between different levels of government and education providers. Each model has its own strengths and weaknesses.
It's like a global laboratory of education, with each country experimenting with different formulas. But wouldn't it be amazing if your Australian qualifications were instantly recognized somewhere else, say in Germany or Japan?
That's the dream, right? Seamless global mobility for learners and workers. And it's not entirely science fiction. Regional frameworks like the EQF are laying the groundwork for that kind of interconnectivity. We could even see a truly global framework someday.
That is the massive undertaking.
I can only imagine the negotiations involved.
Yeah.
But even without a single global system, just comparing these different frameworks must yield some valuable insights, right? What can Australia learn from other countries and vice versa? Well, absolutely. It's all about sharing best practices. Maybe one country has a fantastic way of integrating micro-credentials into their framework, or other has cracked the code on digital credentialing that's secure and user-friendly. By studying these successes, Australia can refine its own approach.
It's like a global brainstorming session for building the best possible education systems. But doesn't all this standardization risk squashing the unique aspects of different countries' educational approaches?
That's a valid concern. Nobody wants a world where every education system looks the same. The goal is comparability, not uniformity. We can learn from each other, while still valuing the unique strengths and traditions of each country's educational culture.
So it's finding that sweet spot
Yeah,
between global recognition and preserving what makes Australian education distinct.
precisely. It's a tightrope walk.
Mhm.
But it's essential for creating a world where learners can move freely and their skills are values, no matter where they acquire them.
We've covered so much ground in this deep dive, from the AQF's inner workings to its global implications. What stands out to you as the most significant takeaway?
For me, it's the emphasis on transparency, that anyone can look up a qualification on a register and understand exactly what it means. This builds trust in the system, not just within Australia, but globally. It's something other countries can learn from as well.
I agree that transparency is incredibly powerful. Makes me appreciate the AQF even more, knowing it's built on such a solid foundation. But as always, there's more to explore. What's one question you'd like our listener to ponder, based on everything we've discussed today?
Hmm. I'd ask them to think about what role they want the AQF to play in their own WN learning journey. Is it a tool for planning a career path, a way to validate skills they already have, or maybe a source of inspiration to try something totally new? The AQF is there to empower them, and it's up to each individual to make the most of it.
That's a perfect note to end on. Thanks for joining me on this deep dive into the Australian Qualifications Framework. And to our listener, we hope you're feeling equipped to navigate the exciting world of Australian education and training.